Go rolling.
All right, GMOs. Alan Leshner, the chief executive of Science Magazine, came out last week in a big support of GMOs, and he stated, "There is a wide opinion gap between scientists and the general public in the United States when it comes to their attitudes about the state of science and science-related policy." And according to a Pew Research poll that he quoted, he said, when asked about U.S. scientific achievements and whether or not they are the best or among the world's best, only 54% of Americans say that yes, compared to 92% of scientists. On a whole host of other issues, we find that even though it is very hard to get 9 out of 10 Americans to agree on anything, 9 out of 10 Americans cannot agree that America is great. They cannot agree on whether or not there is a God. You can't get 9 out of 10 wine experts to agree that Cabernet is good. You can't even get phony toothpaste commercials to say 9 out of 10 dentists support their product. And yet, we see that 9 out of 10 scientists can agree not only that American scientific achievements are among the world's best, but we have 9 out of 10 scientists say global warming is man-made, even though the public does not agree. 9 out of 10 scientists agree that vaccinations are safe. And finally, 9 out of 10 economists, 9 out of 10 scientists.
That was perfect. Freudian slip there. Oh, shit.
I'm reading it right here. It says most scientists, 88%, said that eating GM foods is generally safe, for example, whereas a mere 37% of the public agreed.
Well, first of all, thank you for getting to the point about GMOs. And you said the key thing was what you said at the end, that eating GM foods is safe for human consumption. And I am not going to disagree with you there.
You said generally safe?
My concern with genetically modified crops, for example, is this kind of Roundup Ready stuff, where you have this Roundup Ready corn. Corn is bred to be resistant to this herbicide, and then you spray this herbicide all over this field, right? And it kills everything else. Like, I'm concerned about the environment. I'm concerned that monarch butterflies, for example, don't have milkweed growing alongside the field because all this pesticide and this poison has been spread. So to me, what genetically modified crops represent is they represent this kind of ideology that our environment has to be constructed in such a way that it provides maximum benefits for humans, right, and maximum economic growth for the economic elite. It's kind of a little bit concerning to me and kind of scary in a way because, you know, we have these monocultures, we have these gigantic fields. It's just this one strain, and you know, this one strain instead of putting focus on
I'm going to challenge
and genetic diversity.
That piece there that you just presented, Joey, simply because of the fact that we've only had one single generation of human beings who have experienced genetically modified food, so we do not know the long-term impacts. We don't know how it's going to affect children 30, 40, 50 years from now. I mean, you look at, you know, certain laboratories, they genetically modify crops to be resistant to illness, and in turn, when we eat that corn or wheat or soybeans, you know, it doesn't matter if you eat meat or vegetarian, you ingest these, this genetically modified food, is filled with antibiotics, and it's going to have an adverse impact on the human immune system. You know, not only is it making the crops resistant to certain diseases, but also it's going to have an impact on the DNA and the genetic structure of the people who eat that food, because that's how the food chain works.
Well, I haven't seen any research that says that. But to Brian's point, I completely agree with Brian's point, which is why it's very important. The Wall Street Journal reported on Friday that the EPA is now introducing limits on GMO corn, specifically for the reason that it is not resistant to bug-killing, or I should say bug killers, particularly the corn rootworm. The EPA, of course, the industry is complaining because the plan is aimed at widely grown corn varieties sold by Monsanto, as well as DuPont and Dow Chemical. But the EPA is saying to the industry, we gave you a chance to solve this on your own, and you're not solving it, and the problem's getting worse. So the EPA is now stepping in.
And sorry, Joe, what was the problem that you described here?
The problem, specifically corn rootworm, that it's eating way too much of corn. That doesn't get so much at your environmental concern, but it does get at the concern of
economic growth, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And just in general of the problem that GMO can create, not so much that it's safe for consumption, which it is, but that it is
monoculture is just one strain
exactly
that's just being planted all over the place.
Spoken
And
like
aside from that,
scientist.
you gotta look at the
One pest
ecological
comes in, they're all
impact.
gone.
Okay, you look at genetically modified fish farms. Okay, like right now today on the planet Earth, there's no such thing as a wild salmon anymore because all the wild salmon have been interbred with genetically modified salmon. The same goes true for corn. Nowhere it doesn't matter. You can say you're eating organic all you want to, but this genetically modified corn is pollinating and it's gonna go. It's not pollen doesn't decide which plant it's gonna land on. The wind does. So if you have a genetically modified genes from pollen pollinating non-genetically modified corn, the offspring of that corn is going to be genetically modified.
Well, that last point I think is a very good point, but and I agree with you. But on the earlier points you were making about genetically modified salmon and salmon farms, I hope you would agree with me that is better than farming natural wild salmon because you run out pretty quickly and it can be damaging for the environment.
Well, I do agree. I mean, it's all about sustainability. There's a certain amount of salmon in the ocean that human beings can naturally take from the ocean without having an adverse impact on the ecology. But, there's a gigantic demand for seafood on planet Earth, and that's really a luxury. It's not out of necessity. It's because people like the taste of salmon. People like the taste of these of halibut.
Lobster's really good, man.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like that's invertebrate. This means it's not. We can eat so much crab, it doesn't matter. But salmon and halibut and tuna. These are
sea turtles.
Yeah, well, some people eat their eggs, and they're.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
no, I was totally kidding.
Yeah, people do eat sea turtle eggs. And people go into the beach and dig up sea turtle eggs.
Wow. I thought I was making a joke.
No, not at all. And Costa Rica, sea turtle omelets. Yeah.
Motherfuckers wonder why the ocean's having a mass extinction, dude.
The thing about GMOs for me is three things. Number one, I do support labeling of it. I think that there needs to be further research done. My main concern is I don't think they're necessarily entirely good or bad, but my concern is at least in the United States and many other Western countries, the agriculture industry, Monsanto and other companies have thrown a lot of money towards scientific research and regulatory agencies like the FDA and others to promote basically the safety and positives of the GMOs, which they may well be, but there still is some inherent bias there when you get corporate money involved in corporations.
Right.
Yeah, let's compare.
Monsanto is a messed up.
Let's check this out. All right, the EPA. Okay, you still.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that's the other thing too about those corporate practices is also there's been many cases where farmers will be sued by Monsanto if they have seed contamination. It makes farming a lot more expensive in many cases because a lot of times they purposely make where the seed does not replicate so that people have to keep buying more of it, which it helps their bottom line, but is it the most affordable way to farm? No. And again, that's a concern because it risks damage to small farmers and the developing world and otherwise, and those corporations spend a lot of money to lobby third world nations, especially to adopt GMO crops, which may have some benefit, but they also have a lot of drawbacks, one of which I said is cost prohibitive. And then the other thing about GMOs is just that I think we have to have a balance. I think that there's some mutations or modifications that can be beneficial, but we can't have too much of this, so-called Frankenfeed, where we're just doing things like creating an apple that doesn't brown just because we don't like brown apples.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I mean,
I think that's kind of weird.
Sunflowers with teeth.
Yeah, I mean,
if my apple is browning, I want to know that. If it's bruised, I want to be able to see that.
So there's things like that we have to be careful of. And my main concern with the GMOs is I don't trust many of the players involved, and there just needs to be further research and more of a balanced approach taken. But I don't think they're necessarily inherently bad, because it is true they have increased crop yields. But again, you look at agricultural costs, agricultural practice, all those kind of things, and we have to strike a balance.
And
Scott, you're gonna make a.
Something about the EPA.
What?
Say something about the EPA.
The fucking. Alright, so glyphosate is the main ingredient in Roundup, which is what, we get our Roundup ready plants. Mm-hmm. So, it's. But the EPA.
And who makes Roundup?
The EPA considers glyphosate to be non-carcinogenic and relatively low in dermal and oral acute toxicity. Then the European Commission, 2002, found a relationship between exposure during pregnancy and cardiovascular malformations. And it's got some links with
but is that one
B-cell
cross-sectional
lymphoma.
Study?
But there's a guy, he's been saying for years that, it's a common industrial pesticide there. I forget his name. It's a guy, he was out of Berkeley, a black guy. He was doing research on amphibians, and it showed that, certain chemicals, I forgot, it's like Redix or something, it's this commonly used pesticide, and he showed where over like a 20-year period that this pesticide was demasculating the frogs. So you'll have male frogs who would start growing female sexual body parts. They would be hermaphrodites.
Yeah, there's lots of these kinds of reports. Absolutely. It's kind of scary.
And but the EPA and the petrochemical companies, and they have basically got in bed and just done everything they can to discredit his evidence. But continuously, he conducted experiments the same with different species, and he continuously has the same results. And you have the plutocracy, the government, and the corporations trying to silence him and distance his work. But, it's valid, and it's been proven valid.
Here's what I think should be the point from that, though. There's a lot of concerns in agriculture, particularly on pesticides, which Monsanto does GMOs, but they also do pesticides, and also on hormones in cows and in other creatures, especially because it gets into milk.
Right.
So I think
that shit was so bad, Monsanto sold it.
Right. So there's a lot
PR.
of things that are concerning in agriculture, and a lot of things concerning about Monsanto. But I think a lot of that has been latched on to GMO, and then when people say GMO, people start thinking of other things that aren't actually GMO.
Well, be realistic. In 2015 in the world, who owns like 90% of the genes of the 90% of the world's soybeans, man? That's Monsanto.
It's mostly, Monsanto, DuPont,
no, it's
and
just
Dow Chemical.
Monsanto.
90% for that one thing, but I'm just saying in general, those three companies tend to dominate on genetically modified
I think when you come down to the science on issues like this, it's a lot like a lot of other issues. When we have a government that's so corrupt and that people just don't have any trust in, people start not trusting their institutions because they get so corrupted that, people are generally going to distrust whatever the EPA says about, if they have a feeling that. Brian's raising his hand. What's up?
Yeah, I want to make one more point before we wrap up, and that is about BT corn. So BT corn is a type of GMO corn, and it's inserted with a gene from a soil bacterium. So the pollen, the plant, it produces this protein that's typically associated with a soil bacterium, right? And this protein is toxic to pests. Well, it's also toxic to other insects. For example, butterflies, moths, certain species, right? And I'm reading directly from a 2014 study. Bt maize pollen, even at low pollen densities, adversely affects sensitive Lepidoptera species. Lepidoptera means butterflies and moths.
Barbecue, no butterfly. The hell
And-
you need butterfly for?
For example, a single uptake of 4 or more Bt pollen grains was sufficient to kill larvae, with earlier instars being even more sensitive. So essentially what we're doing is we're genetically modifying these plants so that, so we can improve crop yields. while at the same time we're spewing this poison to sterilize and kill other species. And that's the kind of food system we have with GMOs, is that it's kind of without regard for the environment at large. And that's my big concern with GMOs. And that's why I want it labeled and I want to know what these effects are. And I would prefer not to eat anything GMO.
But you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it.
Well, here's my biggest concern with GMO, because I know we gotta wrap up here. My biggest concern is that it's been banned by the European Union for no scientific reason, political reasons, and as a result,
because people want it for democratic reasons.
As
Let's call it what it is.
Because I've given no reason to be concerned about this. So
Democratic reasons. Those are the political reasons.
As a result, in most of Africa, they have outlawed GMO as well. So in the place where they need GMO the most, where they need agricultural innovation the most, they've banned it because of Europe banning it and having ultimately a lot of influence in Africa. And that concerns me a lot.
Concerns me a lot when Europeans use their logic and concern for the environment to actually protect it. Oh, wait. No, that sounds logical.
All right, so Brian, dude, I'm just sitting over here. High as shit, you just made me realize that Jim Morrison, like 45 years ago on an acid trip when he said "Scream of the Butterfly," he was talking about BT corn.
BT corn.
Saying March Against Monsanto, May 23rd, 2015, be there in the streets.
And Tyrone Hayes.
Stand up for the butterflies.
Is the frog guy, Tyrone Hayes from Berkeley.
All right, so check
Never
it
trust
out.
a black man.
All right.